Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne, and welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. It's Monday morning, January the 18th, and what we're going to do today is we're just going to focus on this past Sunday's New York Times from yesterday the 17th. So here we are, and the opening, I opened with that was the above the fold, yesterday's front page New York Times, the front of the Capitol, draped with the American flags, flanked by Secret Service agents, and the American flags, they're the same, they're almost the same as some of the same flags that were used just a week or so ago to beat up some police and attack people, wielded as weapons by right-wing wingnuts to somehow symbolize their white supremacy and fear of representative government. Anyway, let's get the whole page up there, and so we'll get rid of that, and we'll get the whole page, the whole front page. It was sort of interesting, the whole deal today. And let's put on the whole. We'll put it on the front page here for a second. So you'll notice that on the far right, you got as Trump falls, a party braces for pitchforks, and then right below the pictures, before the Capitol riot, thousands make small donations, and over in the far right on the bottom, how Twitter got the Trump ban going, and to the left of that, assault spawned a new rally cry for extremists. Well, what a mouthful that is. And this was just on the front page. So what's going on is Trump's allies are looking to punish the people in the Congress and in other places who broke ranks with them, which is why they were immediately threatening Mike Pence, and now they're going after Mitch McConnell. And meanwhile, it's really interesting within the last 24 hours, as of yesterday, Mitch McConnell was trying to, it appeared as if he was sort of trying to flush the whole Trump thing out of the Republican Party. And some of these figures came out within the last 24 hours about the amount of Republicans that are supporting Trump still. And I'll bet you McConnell shifts a little bit by tomorrow. At the bottom of the page there, we've got the, well, not the bottom of the page, but right below the fold there, a Republican Party braces before the riot. 1,000 made small donations online. What happened is this guy Keith Lee, who is a far-right, militant Christian conservative, an ardent QAnon fan. He's the guy who organized some of these caravans. Remember about back in September? They were shutting down, we had one here in Northern California, and they shut down Biden's when he was on his way to a rally, and they shut down the Tappan Zee Bridge at one point. So this guy's got a bullhorn, and he's leading this whole crowd into the Capitol, and he stops in the middle of the floor. They have this all on video because everybody took pictures of the whole thing. So he stops in the middle of the floor to videotape himself and live stream himself to the fans, telling them to send in donations right now. If they couldn't afford to be here, they could support the group by sending in $5 and $10 donations right away. The third big article about this was the assault spawns a new rally cry for extremists. So, in addition to sort of overthrowing the government, attempting to overthrow the government and igniting a civil war, these guys want to ban minorities, Jews, and all immigrants. And they're complaining that the politicians who have lied, betrayed, and sold out the American people for decades, we're going to force them to scatter like rats. We're going to force them to scatter like rats. This is what's happening. The 6th of January is going to become another Ruby Ridge or the Bundy occupation of in Oregon. And it's going to wind up, people are seeing now, that's going to wind up fueling recruitment and inciting further violence for years. Maybe, maybe not. The other stories that were interesting was talking about Biden and his big 10-day sprint. So I suspect that within the first 10 days, they're going to sign more executive orders than you can shake a stick at. There's an interesting bottom of the page article about Twitter and how they coaxed the boss at Twitter to finally do the banning. Well, he didn't. He was on a island in the Pacific when he got the call of what was going on, and he let this decision up to his chief in charge. So he was sort of opposed to it at first, and he let her make the decision. The last article on the whole front page here is the parents fretting about their children spending too much time in their iPhones and their Xboxes. So while the two parents are sitting there probably with their iPhones and Xboxes, wondering why the kids haven't picked up and read anything and are just completely addicted to this and going nuts. So the front page of the New York Times, half of the articles, 50% of the articles are about the mob that attacked the Capitol last week. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Then we go on to page 19, where there's a follow-up story, so let's get rid of that, with a lot of the symbols that were used by the crowd here. Okay, so these guys are all connected with, let's see if we got the page, there it is. All right, let's just put that up full on the page. So, a lot of these guys, the logos that you see, these green frogs and Marvel comic book face masks and Trump looking like Rambo and signs with God, Guns, and Trump, a guy with the sweatshirt, Camp Auschwitz, Confederate flags, the Boogaloos, the Proud Boys, a lot of these little hand gestures they make. These guys are, I don't know what planet they're on, and but that's a longer discussion. But this is I'm just sort of giving you what's in the paper today. That's what's going on, and this was, it'll blow your socks off to see what's going on around the country here. Moving on, the last thing in the front section about it's not the end of Trump for the paper though, but the last page on the back of the first section there is an article by Gianni Belafonte. She writes there it is. She writes she's an editorial writer or an op-ed writer, and she's in the paper regularly. And this is a story about the Trump Links. The Trump Links is a golf course, a public golf course in the Bronx. It's a public golf course in the Bronx, and it's quite visible from the Whitestone Bridge. So if you're driving out of Queens into the Bronx, it's right there on the headlands over there. And it's this public golf course that Trump bid on, and a whole long story about how he wound up getting it. Anyway, it's in the middle of the Bronx, which is 40%, a quarter of the population lives in poverty, and 44% are black. They needed a golf course there, like a hole in the head. You know, what they wanted to get was this park. This small enclave of Italian community, white community, was there for a little bit of a period of time, and they were trying to pump up the real estate values by getting a golf course in and turning it into this little white enclave. Well, it never happened. The golf course was never successful. And basically, they're saying Trump's volatility got in the way of the whole thing happening, the whole thing getting successful. He was going to be this great big mecca for golf enthusiasts around the world. And it was his usual bravado about it was going to be great. It was going to be big leave, a kind of golf course like you have never seen, making piles of cash so high you couldn't believe it. The best, the very best. This is, anyway, these words basically sunk him in the contract that he made with New York. It would have taken them something like 226 years to recoup their investment with Trump as the manager of the golf course. These guys... He doesn't know what he's doing in business, and if he doesn't have a mobster in back of him backing him up, or a government with a pile of cash sitting over here, he just gets lost. Okay, that was the basic news kind of section. The style section was really interesting. The style section was really interesting this week. In fact, there were two. This was almost a highlight of the paper. I thought last week you could have tossed the whole style section out, and this week it was really cool. Two stories. On the top of the page, it's "Hail to the Artifact," and it's "Few presidents have exploited the theatrical grandeur of the job quite as enthusiastically or as cynically as Donald Trump. They have tapped into the dregs of dynasty and the bonfires of the vanity, settled into our lizard brain. For 4 years, we parred soap opera chic instead of the West Wing. The visual demanded attention, just like the tweets." He went on to say, "The political costume department of our collective imagination will never be the same. I thought that was just precious. The political costume department of our collective imagination will never be the same. The article under it, the article below the fold there, is that the psychics will see you now. And this is a story about a psychic in Los Angeles, and business has been quite brisk since the pandemic. She got twice as many calls as she usually has, and she does these Zoom conferences with people. She chose a tarot card to reflect the state of the nation, and it was the one that depicts a tall building struck by lightning with flames bursting from the top of the building and occupants leaping to their death. The tower is the end of a system as we know it, the end of an era as we know it. That was the tarot card she drew the other day. She said all of us are feeling the fear of everybody. Not exactly a terribly positive way to look at things at all. There were two other pretty cool things in here. Let's get this other one back up. And this is more environmental here. Finally, got something positive coming up, and we'll get it here with the seaweed free. No, not there. The one right before it. Okay, there we go. And it's they're waiting for kelp to catch on. So it's in the style section, Sunday style section, page 2, and it's a big article about kale. And I've talked about a few seaweeds before. I cook with seaweeds. I'm not crazy about them in general, but I do add them to the salads I use and cook with them sometimes. And some of them are really very interesting and tasty, and they can be, and they provide a lot of nutrients. And kelp is loaded with potassium, magnesium, iodine, whole sorts of vitamins. Really good detoxifying your system. And ecologically, they're really good for in the ocean. They're able to do what they call generative ocean farming because of the kale, and they're able to sort of reduce algae blooms, and they'll keep the shoreline more steady. In addition to that, the nutritional value is absolutely fantastic, and you can eat the stuff, and you can use it in all sorts of different ways. You can turn it into fabrics and everything like that. And there's been a big boom in people's interest in it. And just in this one particular area we're talking about, I think in Maine here, and they were doing 30,000 pounds a year, and now they're doing over 1 million pounds a year. And the guy was really resourceful because you need to harvest it, and then you need to bring it to a facility and dry it all out before you pulverize it, whatever you do to it. And there were all these empty tobacco barns all over Connecticut. So he started using them to dry out the kelp. I thought that was a nice story, a positive story. One more quick positive story. Don't want us to overdo it here with that. But right there it is. Let's put it on the front. Yeah, dreaming. Yeah, the dreaming story. So this is still in the style section of all places. And it's just an article. It's no big deal. But it's Imagine a Better Future. Imagining a better future can help a human survive and thrive in difficult times. Couldn't agree more. A couple of positive things and interesting things in the style section. The style section came through this week. I'd give it 10 points there. The arts and entertainment section, well, forget about it. It wasn't even worth opening. The next one, and this is my hometown here, or almost hometown, or what was when I first got here. The Sunday business section has this really interesting article, and this has been going on for a while. It's been going on for a little bit of a while now, and it's about people getting out of the Bay Area. And the headline of it is, "They can't abandon the Bay Area fast enough. Tech workers and companies are packing up. What comes next?" Holy mackerel, what comes next? My God, can't imagine. It must be the end of the world as we know it. So if you looked at the picture, I don't know if you noticed in that picture, you see that that line coming right down there, right in the middle of, that's the bridge. Somebody's walking on the bridge. So that's the Bay Bridge coming into San Francisco. And that's the end of the new bridge, the new Bay Bridge that they put from Oakland to San Francisco. And it's got these really interesting structures, and that's the end of it. And it's all lit up at night. It's quite beautiful, very modern, very nice. What the article is about, this has all got to do with people leaving the Bay Area. And the reason they're leaving is because, once the pandemic started, all these techies started working from home. Now, they wound up in San Francisco. It was sort of a long trek getting them into San Francisco in the first place. But they wound up getting there. Silicon Valley is getting really bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of the people they're attracting don't like life in the suburbs down there in San Jose. So they want part of the action in the city. So they start moving up to San Francisco. So suddenly San Francisco, this is like 10, 15 years ago, starts getting inundated with the techies. Well, they get here and they got to go to work. So they get special fancy buses to take them from the city out of the poor neighborhoods, or they get special ferries that they're running them. So all these little special things start to happen, running the techies out of San Francisco back down to the valley. Well, the business is growing so big that all the tech companies start building what they call campuses. Isn't that cute? So Twitter and Google and everybody starts putting these campuses up in San Francisco. So now you've got this massive influx of new techies into San Francisco, in Silicon Valley. The whole area is just flooded with, and this was the punchline that brings the whole thing home here. More money was made faster in the Bay Area by fewer people than at any other time in American history. More money was made faster in the Bay Area by fewer people than at any other time in American history. So because of that, San Francisco became more expensive than New York or anywhere else, and you can get a job. So they want the best of everything, but they're living in these neighborhoods where there's a bum sleeping on the corner, or a homeless person sleeping on the corner at one end, and you're paying $5 for a cup of coffee at the other end of the street, and you've got this new building here against this old thing here, and you got the, anyway, you know what I mean. And the more money you get, the more you create a state of homelessness. I mean, this is a fact of city life. Just look at any large city. The more money, the more high wealth, the more lower wealth you're going to get. They go together like peaches and cream. So that was sort of blew me out, and I really was glad to see it. I hope everybody leaves, and they're all going to go to Austin, Texas. And within 3 years, Austin, Texas will become like the Bay Area was, and we'll go back to normal, and it'll be much nicer. There's a whole other group going to New York, which is also nice. They're putting campuses in New York. Amazon has a campus, and Google and Facebook, they're all getting campuses. So it's marvelous. So maybe everybody will leave and go Zoom their way around and leave us to how things were in the first place. Okay, so we did the style, we did that, and another cute one here, another light one. I'll give you another light one for the day. And this is sort of up my alley in a way. Let's put under the title. Let's put it right up where put it in the middle of the page. Under the home section. Now, I usually don't bother with the home section. They have usually 6 recipes for during the week and a few things like that. And it's usually my first toss-away section, but I skimmed through it, and they have a little section on sharpening your knife. And it just so happens that I've been starting to use a stone to sharpen my knife lately, just recently, because it was left to me by my German baker who we collaborated for a long time on the Twinkie project. Anyway, he left this gorgeous knife. This is like a Goudet. It's a couple $100, absolutely stunning knife. And this stone. And I think it's a whetstone, but I don't even know the difference. I have another stone I'm using, which I'm sure is a whetstone. But they talk about using a stone, they talk about using a whetstone, so you want it damp whenever you're sharpening a knife with it. So you want to have it soaking in water for at least 5 minutes, and make sure it's a little damp while you're sharpening the knife. And you want to start the blade on the stone, and then you want to lift it up at about a 15 or 20 degree angle, and you're going to make a sort of a J shape. It's right here, and I didn't know exactly how to do it, and I was resorting to a YouTube video to find this out, and suddenly there it was in today's paper. So I thought that was a nice, pleasant affect to have for the day in the paper. So let's get rid of that. and we'll put up let's go to the book review. Well, yeah, forget that one. Let's go to the book review. And the book review was, the books weren't, anyway, it was so-so, but what I really liked in the book review was the Susan Minot. I have absolutely no idea who she is. I never heard of her. I am culturally ignorant on this one. But I always read the book review section. I like to read what authors are reading, writing, and that's what this is. They interview somebody, and they, what's on your nightstand, what's the best book, etc. And it was really interesting. What's the last great book you read? And she recommended Caste by Isabel Wilkinson, which was the looking at all the racial issues from a new angle. That was a book that came out this summer, and it got quite a bit of play. And then she mentioned a book called A Judgment in Stone by Ruth Rendell. I used to read a lot of Ruth Rendell, well, a lot of books on tape by her when I used to work in the middle of the night, and I would listen to audio books. And I listened to a lot of her books, and British detective writer. And she wrote one of the most stunning lines ever. In one of her books, she described the greenest greens are the rice fields in China, and she was describing these hills as she was on a train going through China. I'll never forget that line. The greenest greens are the rice fields of China. So anyway, Ruth Rendell wrote a book called A Judgment in Stone. She said it's an entertaining story of the evils of illiteracy masquerading as a murder mystery. So it's about people being illiterate and how it's masquerading as a murder mystery. She recommends David Sedaris if you're looking for any humor. And this was another cute one. In 1966, Elvis Presley recorded Bob Dylan's Tomorrow is a Long Time before Bob Dylan released his own version. Elvis Presley sang a Bob Dylan song in 1966, that he got from Dylan. And he sang it before Dylan did. She asks, what do you wish more women, what should more authors write about? Women's experiences. What would happen if one woman told the truth about her life? The world would split open. I've been reading a few women lately, including Louise Gluck, who write about their lives and things in it. So it's not a completely desert, but they probably could stand a little bit more literature on it. I wouldn't argue with that. And this was the best. What do you plan to read next? And she's going to read Blackballed, The Black Vote and the U.S. Democracy by Darryl Pinckney. He's a brilliant mind which can make simple the complications. He can present in a simple way complicated issues. So that page was a real interesting one. The other really one that grabbed me was the Jim Comey, who I'm really having a hard time with. I like the guy. He's honorable. He's like everybody's Boy Scout. The book is Truth, Transparency, and Trust. And he says you can't have a working democracy without an agreed upon standard of truth. You can't have a working democracy without an agreed upon standard of truth. Well, this is what I was talking about the other day on the when I did the little circle on the board, and the Fox News group over here and the truth over here, and these people denying the truth all the time. So I'm really like Comey for that aspect of it, but he doesn't want to go after Trump legally for anything he did in office, and that's a whole other day. I'm not going to do any more about that. I think he was on one of the talk shows this afternoon talking about it, and I'm not quite grokking where he's coming from with the whole thing. Let's finish it up with the magazine section. We're almost there. Get rid of that. And let's bring up the magazine. Wow, what a magazine. Holy mackerel. Well, that's here's the front page of it. So the front page of the magazine is it's an article by Tom Snyder. And this was pictures that were taken. It's called the American Abyss. And there's a Timothy Snyder. Timothy Snyder also has that little handbook out on tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century on Tyranny. And Rachel Maddow has had Timothy on a few times. He's read things from this book. probably do a whole show just reading this book, wouldn't hurt. But anyway, he writes a rather lengthy article describing what's going on in the midst of this madness over here. Let me get rid of that and go to the other one on the front of the magazine, the first article that came up, and outfoxed. And Lou Dobbs on Fox Business has a lot of opinions about the integrity of the election and the irregularities of mail-in voting, of election voting machines and voting software. And Dobbs gets into a whole big rap with the people who, the company Smartmatic, which is the company that all sorts of claims about this country. Anyway, the real big controversy going on about the legitimacy of the votes and blah, blah, blah. And Dobbs sort of backs off on the real hardcore conspiracy theory because it's absolutely bogus. So he lets, I believe, is what's going on here. I started to read this, but I didn't get all the way into it. But the punchline here was that these guys aren't radical enough anymore. They're not radical enough anymore. And this new network called Newsmax, their viewership in the 4 to 8 block in the evening is up almost 500%, and Fox is down almost 40%. So it's the QAnon rabbit hole is increased their viewership 500%. Fox News is not radical enough, doesn't lie enough to keep these people satisfied. This wasn't in the newspaper, but along the same lines. Let me just flip it in for a reality check. The Huffington Post put this picture up, and there's Trump, and it's it's Trump isn't our guy. He's nothing without his supporters. Seriously hoping they'll lock him up. Trump betrayed us. He's trying to save his own ass. May he rot in prison. My faith in Trump is ended today. A effing sellout. Feeling betrayed, far-right extremists have a new message for Trump. Get out of our way. I mean, this is like lunacy on steroids. The last article that was in the magazine that was worthwhile looking at for you reality buffs is the story about what happened when Obama left office and handed over that's what it's called. It's called the last handoff. So it's the last handoff, and it's what happened when how the fraught, utterly uncharted transition from Obama to Trump was a prelude to the chaos that's engulfing Washington now. So it's a story about what happened then and what's happening now. And I don't know who wrote this. I'm not Schwartz. I'm not familiar with the name who wrote it. Anyway, 3 really interesting reads in the magazine section this week. That's almost a half hour. That's more than enough. I hope this worked. Peace, patience, and persistence, and maybe we can figure out how to get out of this thing one of these days. Alrighty.